The Christian in Complete Armour by William Gurnall. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17. Chapter 11. An exhortation to strengthen hope, pressed from three arguments. Labor, O ye saints, to strengthen your hope. There is a weak faith, so a wavering hope. This you are, by the diligent use of all means, to establish. Now, hope is firm and solid when the Christian does not fluctuate, but by this anchor hold, which hope hath on the promise, is kept from those dejections and tumultuous fears with which they that have no hope are swallowed up, and they whose hope is but weak are sadly decomposed and shaken, that is, a solid body which is compact and free from heterogeneous mixtures. The more pure gold is from dross, and whatever is of a distinct nature to itself, the more solid it is. So hope, the more it is refined from groundless presumption on the one hand, or slavish fear and distrust on the other, the more solid and strong it is. This, in Scripture, is called the assurancy of hope. Now to provoke you to a holy zeal in your endeavor after this. Section 1. Consider it the duty so to do. By the Baptist doctrine, no man is bound to labor for such an assurance, but whether we should believe God or not, judge ye. What saith the Spirit? Hebrews chapter 6, verse 11. We desire that every one of you do show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope unto the end, that ye be not slothful, but followers of them who through faith and patience inherit the promises. Observe first the thing he exhorts to endure for, the full assurance of hope. They whose hope is weak sail but a little side wind. The apostle would have them go before the wind, and be carried with a full gale to heaven, which is done when the soul, like a sail spread to the wind, is so filled with the truth and goodness of the promise that it swells into an assured hope of what is promised, and rejoices in a certain expectation of what it shall have when it comes to the shore of eternity, though it be now tossed and weather-beaten with 1,000 temptations and trials in its passage. Secondly, observe whom he presses this duty upon, not some few choice Christians as an enterprise laid out for them above the rest of their fellow soldiers, but he lays it on every person that will prove himself a Christian. We desire that every one of you do show the same diligence, etc. In our civil trade, and particularly worldly calling, it were sinful for every poor man to propound such a vast estate to himself in his own desires as he sees some few, the wealthiest merchants, who got by their trade so as no less shall content him. But in the spiritual trade of a Christian it is very warrantable for every one to covet to be as rich in grace as the best. Paul will not think himself wronged if thou desirest to be as holy a man as he was, and labor after as strong a faith and steadfast a hope as he had. Yea, thou oughtest not to be content thyself with what thou hast, if there were but one degree of grace more to be had than what at present thou hast obtained. And thirdly, observe what he imputes the wickedness of the saints' grace to, not to an impossibility of obtaining more, but their sloth and laziness, and therefore he opposes this to that blessed frame of heart so much wishes them. Verse 12, that ye be not slothful. Indeed, it is the diligent hand makes rich, as in this world's good, so in this heavenly treasure also. Section 2. Labor to strengthen thy hope of salvation, or thou wilt show that thou little esteemest Christ and his salvation. And we prize any good, so we labor more or less to assure ourselves of it. If a prince should lose a pin from his sleeve or a penny out of his purse, and one shall bring him news, they are found. The things are so inconsiderable that he would not care whether it were true or not. But if his kingdom lay at stake in the field, and intelligence comes that his army hath got the day and beaten the enemy, oh, how he would long to have his hope, and that is now raised a little, confirmed more strongly by another post. Is heaven worth so little that you cannot be satisfied with a few probabilities and uncertainties? Thou basely despisest that blessed place, if thou be no more solicitous to know the truth of thy title to it. When Micaiah seemed to give Ahab some hope of a victory by bidding him to go up and prosper, the thing being passionately desired by the king, he fears the worth, and therefore cannot rest till he knows more of this matter. And the king said unto him, How often shall I adjure thee, that you tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 16. Maybe thou hast some loose wavering hopes of heaven floating in thy soul. If now thou didst think thy eternal woe or weal lay in the truth or the falsehood of that hope, certainly thou wouldst search thy heart by the word, and abjure thy conscience after an impartial review, to tell thee the naked truth, what thy state is, and whether thou mayest in God's name, and with the leave of his word, hope it shall be thy portion or not. And this thou wouldst do, not hypocritically, as that wretched king did, who abjured Mahacah to tell him the truth, and then would not believe him, though he did it faithfully, but with a great plainness of heart, it being about a business of no less importance than what shall become of thee to eternity. Peter, when surprised with the tidings of Christ's resurrection, though the report did not find such credit with him as it might, yet by his speedy running to and looking into the scepter, he showed both how dearly he loved his Lord, as also how joyful a man should be, if the news were true that he was alive. Thus, Christian, though the promise of eternal life hath not hitherto produced such an assurance of hope, that thou art the person that shall undoubtedly enjoy it, yet show what thoughts thou hast of that blissful state, by endeavoring to strengthen thy hope, and put thyself out of doubt thereof. Section 3. Consider this also, in the last place, that thou knowest not what stress thy hope may be put to before thou diest. The wisest mariner does victual his ship for the longest day. He reckons on crosswinds which may retard his voyage and make it more troublesome, knowing well it is easier carrying provisions to sea than getting it there. God himself tells us we have need of patience. He means great store of patience. After that we have done the will of God, we may receive the promise. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36. And if of patience, then of hope, because patience bears all on hope's back. Now, because we know not the certain degree of hope that will serve our turn, God having purposely concealed the weight of affliction and temptation he intends to lay on us, therefore we should never cease our endeavor to strengthen it. There are hard duties to be performed and strong trials to be endured, and those require a hope proportionable. We are to hold fast the rejoicing of our hope unto the end. Hebrews 3:6. Now will the Christian of weak hope do this? He, alas, is like a leaky ship with a rich laden. The fear of sinking before he gets to port takes away the owner's joy. Bid such a one rejoice in his inheritances laid up in heaven for him, and he will tell you he questions whether ever he shall come there. Patient waiting for mercy deferred is another hard duty. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. Now, weak hope is short-breathed and cannot stay long with any quietness. Weak persons are commonly hardest to please, soon peevish and forward, if they have not what they would when they desire it. When David's faith and hope were under a distemper, then he falls out with all. The prophet himself that brought him the news of the kingdom cannot escape his censor, and all because the promise stayed longer before it was delivered than he expected. I said in my haste, all men are liars. Psalms 116 verse 11. Whereas the promise went not a day before its due time, but he missed of its true reckoning through his inordinate desire. But take him when his faith and hope are strong, and he is not so hasty, but he thinks his estate in God's hand is safe as it were paid into his own. Psalms 65 verse 1, Praise waiteth for thee, O Lord, or as the Hebrew may be rendered, Praise is silence for thee, as if the holy man had said, Lord, I quietly wait for a time of praise thee. My soul is not in an uproar because thou stayest. I am not murmuring, but rather stringing my harp and tuning my instrument with much patience and confidence, that I may be ready to strike up when the joyful news of my deliverance is come. You have made a to-do to make the child quiet till dinner, though he sees preparations for a great feast. But one that is grown up will be soon pacified when he is kept a little longer than ordinary from his meal upon such an occasion. O Christian, it is our childishness and weakness of faith and grace, especially of our hope, that makes us so soon out of patience to wait God's leisure. Strength and hope and patience will grow with it. In a word, Christian, thou hast great trials and strong temptations to conquer before you enter the gates of heaven. Now, defend thy hope, and that will defend thee in these. Strengthen that, and that will carry thee through them. The head, every member, is officious to preserve. The hands are lifted up to keep off the blow. The feet run to carry it from danger. The mouth will receive any unsavory pill to draw fumes and humors from it. Salvation is to the soul what the head is to the body, the principal thing it should labor to secure, and hope is our salvation, what the helmet is to the head. Now if he be unwise that venture his head under a weak helmet in the midst of bullets in time of battle, then much more unwise is he that hazards his salvation with a weak hope. No, Christian, the issue of the battle depends on thy hope. If that fail, all is lost. Thy hope is in conflicts with temptation and sufferings, as a prince is amidst his army, who puts life into them all, while he looks on and encourages them to the battle. But if a report of the king's being slain comes to his ears, his courage fails, and heart faints. Therefore Ahab would be held up in his chariot to conceal his danger from his people, the knowledge of which would have cast a damp on their courage. Their hope is the mark Satan's arrows are levied at. If possible, keep that from wounds, or if any time his dart reach it, and thy spirit begins to bleed of the wound which he hath given thee, by questioning whether such great sins can be pardoned as thou hast committed, such old fester sores as thy lusts have been can ever be cured, or affliction so heavy and which have continued so long can possibly be either endured or removed. Now labor to hold up thy hope, though wounded in the chariot of the promise, and bow not by despairing to let the devil trample on thy soul. So soon as thy hope gives up the ghost, will this cursed fiend stamp thee under his feet, and take his full revenge of thee, and that without any power of thy soul to strike a stroke for thy defense. This will so dispirit thee, that thou wilt be ready to throw up all endeavor and attendance on the means of salvation, yea, desperately so. To that purpose is it to think of praying, hearing, and meditating when there is no hope. What? Should we send for the physician when our friend is dead? What good will the chafing and rubbing the body do when the head is severed from it? The army broke up, and every one was sent to his city as soon as it was known that Ahab was dead. And so wilt thou cast off all thoughts of making any head against sin and Satan when thy hope is gone, but fall either into Judas's horror of conscience, or with Cain turn atheist, and bury thy thoughts of thy desperate condition in a heap of worldly projects. End of chapter 11.